Well, well, well. Welcome back to the ProgCast. This is your fanboy host, musicologist, lover of art, Gregg Bendian, and I am so pleased to welcome back to the show someone who is just one of the most talented people I know, one of the smartest and funniest and ooh, I don't know. I just get all goosebumps thinking about him and listening to his music, but actually having a bit of a friendship with him. I'm very happy to welcome back to the program guitarist, lyricist, visual artist, conceptualist, Andy Partridge.
Hey, hey, folks of world. Yeah, you missed out. You missed out. Champion ice skater,
Ah,
uh, plate spinner. Uh,
we'll fly
no, I
that
don't think
in.
any of those things.
We're going to do that in post.
Yeah, we'll do that in post. I'll do all those spinning plates later.
But folks, the occasion, and who needs one to talk to Andy Partridge, but this is a really special occasion. He has a new book out called Pop Artery, and it includes multiple paintings of
Oh, yeah,
his
I recognize that one
songs.
and that one.
And since Andy and I share a trait known as synesthesia, this might be the best chance you'll get to hear Andy talk about these things and have someone actually know what the hell he's talking about. All of the art references are very interesting throughout this book. The opposite page of every painting has a lovely little thought written in there by Andy. I highly recommend it. If you saw Andy's artwork in the middle of the complicated game book that he did with Todd Bernhardt, you see that he is quite the visual artist and has always been, and has certainly always tried to offer his ideas to the people presenting his music, but they weren't always accepted. But he always has them, and we're going to talk about that. Andy, welcome. It's just so nice to see you again.
Oh, it's nice to be back, Greg. And like
All
I say,
right.
you look healthy and fit and healthy and ready for anything.
I try, Andy, I try. I have to say, I was and have always been curious about artists who become musicians, musicians who are artists. Don Van Vliet, known to some people as Captain Beefheart, was a visual artist from day one and a musical artist a little bit later on. So, how can we get into this, Andy? Because what I really am wondering, I know you're a visual guy, and I know you see things you hear, and you hear things you see, and the interest that we share in comic book art and really visual art in general. Because I want to talk to you about film today. I want to talk to you about imagery. Um, did music happen before you were taking pen to hand and doing your drawings as
Mm.
a kid?
No, I think the earliest thing I can remember, apart from the odd track coming out of the radio, because we lived in Malta for the first 2 and a bit years of my life, and I can actually remember some songs coming out of the radio there. Um, my first actual seriously imprinted memory is me throwing up on my dad's lap because we're flying back to England, and I remember the oval window of the airline and the clouds outside, and then me puking on him
At at two?
at 2 and a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So and then I remember I'd never seen flames before, and we were supposed to go in the waiting room of Nice airport while they refueled. And I wouldn't go in there because they had like a Yule log thing. This was just after Christmas. They had a Yule log burning. And I wouldn't go in that room because I didn't know what this living thing was. I thought it meant me evil intent. But
Primal. So
yeah, it's
primal.
primal stuff. I wouldn't go in that room. But it was always visual for me. It was visual for me. I would draw constantly as a kid, and I loved it when my mum would go to the butcher's because I'd get her to beg him to bring back these big sheets of blank newsprint paper, you know. And apart from the odd blood splash on them and a little bit of pencil price working out in the corner, you'd get these big sheets of paper, and I'd sit at the kitchen table and be drawing on I loved drawing on butcher's paper. It was great. It just the whole experience of thinking big, you know.
Is this lead pencil, Andy?
Yeah, yeah. But because I don't think they'd let me have anything else. You know, it's a case of draw it on the floor, that sort of stuff. My mother was exceedingly house proud. You know, that usually means a disguised mental illness of some sort. But she didn't want me marking anything or messing anything up. So, yeah. So at Christmas, an uncle might get me like a big tin box of paints. I loved those. I really did. You know, they had usually a nursery rhyme kind of theme to the tin lid. And they'd be very wide screen. They'd be sort of this kind of size. And then it'd have a fairy tale or Alice in Wonderland or something on it. Then you open up and it seemed like millions of colors. It obviously wasn't that much, but it was, and that was great. I just adored working with that sort of thing. But as a kid, I didn't know that to make thick, opaque colors, you needed different sorts of paint. I'd just go over with the same kind of poster paint type stuff, thinking, why am I washing it away each time I add more, you know? But I was visual. If somebody would say something, I'd think of things, you know, the pictures would come in. If I heard any music, the pictures would come in, which is why I loved novelty songs on the radio. You couldn't have rock and roll on the radio in England in the 50s. So they would allow occasionally a novelty song for the kids, something for the children. And they play these novelty songs, and it'd inevitably be sped up voices, too much reverb, slapback echo to denote something from space, you know, that sort of thing.
Foley.
What, sorry?
Foley.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know,
Big
people
time.
dragging chains across the floor or tearing paper, you know, the classic kind of gravel in a biscuit tin for marching feet, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I loved novelty records because they really gave me the pictures. I mean, some that have stayed with me, ruined me, marked me forever. Was Mommy, Give Me a Drink of Water, or Water, Danny Kaye. And it's this kid who can't sleep at night and he wants his mum's attention, which I used to do most nights. I was petrified of being alone, you know.
Yeah.
My dad was away at sea a lot, and I knew my mother, or she should be in the house, you know. And so I'd end up calling out to her. But so he said, the Danny Kaye kid in the song, he's calling out to his mother. And he's doing all the things, the threats if she won't bring him water, and you know, and he's hallucinating. He can see an airplane flying around his room. It's fantastic arrangement, orchestral arrangement on that. But that sort of stuff, I would live that like a film. You know, if I heard that on the radio, I'd play the film. Every scene was perfectly shot, and yeah, it was in there. So it was all intertwined for me. I would worry about things and then see them because my worry would make visual images. When they tried to get me into religion big time, you know, my dad came back from the Navy and he insisted we do grace at every meal because that's what he had to do in the Navy. So I then start sitting there at the table thinking, oh God, if I open my eyes during this, do I get zapped into a pile of cinders? You know, what happens? Or am I supposed to believe all this stuff? And I worried about that so much that I had a This would really get me into the history books if it was made a fuss of. But I one day I was out playing on my own, only child, out running around, probably digging a hole in the grass or something, and I looked up in the sky and I saw this image of rather Renaissance image of God in the center and saints and angels either side of him, and they were all looking down sternly at me, you know. And I never told anyone at the time, because if I had, I didn't want to make a fuss, you know. I didn't want people in religious robes turning up and saying, he's seen a miracle, you know, and I just lived on the far outpost of this council estate, which is where the poor people are supposed to live, you know. And I didn't want to create a fuss. I didn't want anyone saying you're a naughty boy, saying you've seen God. And no, I really saw him in the clouds, you know. And that was a manifestation of concern that I wasn't religious enough. So it's always been visual, and the visual makes the music, and the music makes the visual, and you know, I can't separate the two. Just can't do it.
I'm so curious. My son Elias, who you've met, is a associate producer in this program, and you know he was wondering about things like, can Andy hear a Picasso painting? Can Andy hear a Pollock? I thought that was an interesting question.
I used to at one time. It's really faded now. It does fade, or it has faded for me. I could hear chords or sounds with if I looked at a color. Orange would be one sound, yellow would be another sound, blue would be another sound. Yeah, you see, that's quite bitter for me. That green you're holding up, I can really, I don't. That's fighting with this drinking chocolate, I'll tell you. And I could hear chord. I mean, I don't have a guitar in this room, so I can't do it for you right now. But yes, certainly chords would be colors, and sometimes visuals would be a color too, like a certain shape of a car would be, oh, that's turquoise blue, and and that seems to be A6. Oh yeah. You know, so I would have all these things would get tied up together. There was no way that I could experience them separately, which to some people I imagine must be a curse, but to me I always found it really helpful.
Isn't it interesting? Because it's kind of, it could be overwhelming, but it can also be something that you channel into something, and we figure out, I don't know, then there's the creative gene, whatever it is, that synthesizes all this synesthesia. But I always loved it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It was never a hindrance. It was always a friend. It was like you were being presented with the whole play, the whole film. There was the orchestra, there were the lines the actors were saying, there was the stage set, there was the whole arc of the story. It was all one thing. The colors of the stage set, the colors of the clothes the actors are wearing, it's all tied in together. It's never separated. It has got weaker for me over the years, which is a shame, but that's age. I'm looking at 71 as the next event, you know, on the event horizon. But it's always been a great help. I mean, that's how I write songs. I can find a chord and I can find another chord that talks to that, and then suddenly I'm describing the play I'm watching, because these chords are the scenery. They're the visuals. Although it's just two chords, it's making a visual, and the actors have slid on to complement this visual that the chord is making. And I'm describing it on paper, what I'm hearing, seeing, and sort of sensing. And there you go. The vast majority of the songs arrive like that. It's very difficult, nay, impossible for me to sit down and, oh, I'll just come up with a bunch of chords and a melody and then fit a lyric to it. It doesn't work like that for me.
And I know that when last time we did one of these, you played the opening chord for Senses, and you said that at that moment when you played it, it brought you to this, I won't say ancient, but an older time of a farmhand, and that
Yeah.
whole scene came to you in one chord, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a medieval sensation.
Medieval.
It's earth. You've got your hands and your feet, and in your mouth you've got the earth, and it's the color makes the substance, makes the time in history. Like it's all totally and utterly connected. But
And
that
you're
I couldn't write songs unless I did it that way.
and you are the poster child for the concept of senses working overtime.
Yeah. See, I never realized when I wrote that song it was about me. I had no idea. I thought I was writing, come on, write a single, Andy. We need a single for this album. Oh yeah, well, you know the whole story, but
Well, but let's take a moment just to say senses working overtime is considered a classic to this day. In fact, David Cross, the American comedian, named his podcast Senses Working Overtime. Did you know that, Andy?
no, I didn't know.
Yeah. So, and the first episode, they talk about XTC and how the title came about, because these are kind of archetypes. I mean, the idea of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 senses, but for me, and I think for you, it's they're so tied together. I taste chords sometimes, you know, and and I just think, oh, that's odd. And then I try to catalog it and see if I'm consistent, because I wonder about this particular quality, this trait. How does it work? And
I've no idea, but do you really want to know?
right, so it's a
I mean,
sort.
if you take the surgeon's scalpel to it, are you in danger of killing it? You'll know what pipes are connected to what pipes after you've cut it all up, but will it still be alive?
It's a really good point.
I mean, so a lot of my favorite music, I won't try and pick apart the chords because I don't want to take the surgeon's scalpel to it.
Well,
I've never worked out Strawberry Fields Forever. I don't want to. I've never worked out Autumn Almanac by the Kinks. I don't want to kill it. I've never worked out most Judy Sills stuff. I don't want to kill it.
I see.
I don't want to say, oh yeah, that bit sticks in there and that sends the blood to that part. And in the meantime, the patient's dying on the table.
Yeah.
Sure, you get the practical Lego brick knowledge of how it's made, but you're in danger of, and I know it does happen, you can destroy the magic inherent in music.
But give me your opinion on this, because I know sooner or later we were going to get around to Tony Williams.
No, you don't have to. It's not obligatory.
No, I mean, I just had Vinny Colaiuta on, and we spent most of the time talking about Tony, his left foot.
I like I when I rebought a CD set of Emergency,
Mm.
there was a disclaimer in it saying the recording quality is so poor and the bass drum is so distorted, we haven't even included it in this mix.
That I
And
haven't seen that, really.
yeah, yeah, they're talking about they hadn't included, it's too distorted. And I'm
Well,
thinking,
this is true that they were that loud.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
he
it's
started that album on a Gibson acoustic hummingbird guitar with a pickup on it, and he said they just drowned him out, so he had to borrow a solid guitar, rent a solid guitar, so he could play in the same room.
yeah. And people who I know saw the band live, say at the Village Gate, said it was incredibly loud, which is
Yeah.
interesting because then it continues into Mahavishnu, where Steve Miller said, John, it's too fucking loud. And John got
Yeah.
mad.
Yeah.
But, the Tony thing I was going to tell you was that speaking of these expanded box sets, and we do have one of yours of recent vintage, looking back at the Big Express, but this idea of the expanded Nefertiti album by Miles.
Hmm.
At the time it was discovered, the rehearsal tape was discovered, the first run through was discovered. I was hanging out with the producer Bob Belden because I was doing some work at Sony Legacy with him. And we found out we were not allowed to release this newly found rehearsal and first take of Nefertiti because Tony Williams' wife said, "You'll remove the mystery."
Hmm. I
You'll
told you that Tony Williams had offered to drum on the Oranges and Lemons album, which scared the pants off of me, and I just had to say no.
you couldn't handle it.
I couldn't handle it, and it would have been too different a flavor to what I was trying to do with those songs at that point in
Oh
time.
yeah, yeah,
I wanted a hard-edged fluorescent pop album
yeah.
that was, very LA window display, kind of citrus colors and all just hard-edged and in time, and I didn't want this electric frazzles. I didn't want this thunder searching for cracks. That Tony
Oh,
Williams
you
played. It's thunder. It's like a thundercloud searching for cracks in the house to get in. And I didn't want that. I wanted massive, great pyramids and cylinders of citrus colors.
and some scratchy bits for scarecrow people.
Sure, yeah. Well, some kitchen implements for
Hey
Pat.
man, this semester I'm teaching my contemporary song class, and we do scarecrow people, and I point to the sonic painting of brushes and the junky percussion and all the things that contribute to the visual of the scarecrow people.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Scarecrows I don't think they'd use sticks to drum with. They use the things that form their hands. It's brushes spanned out and you know.
That's hot. That's really hot stuff, man.
You have to. You've got to have, like I say, you've got to have the scenery. The actors have got to be wearing the right clothes. They've got to be saying the right lines. It's got to
Mm.
sound right. The music coming from the orchestra pit. If it's not all in conversation, you've got an argument, and that's just not attractive. It's not attractive to be part of. It's not attractive to hear.
And one of the things that I point out in my song class is unity of language. The fact that when you choose your metaphors in seagulls, seagulls, I mean, kisser, kisser, but when you choose your metaphors, everything points to the central topic, the motif. Battleship Gray, and you're speaking in colors. We just spoke about that in my class about Joni, painter Joni Mitchell.
But the sea is that warship steel edged kind of color. It's winter time. That's what color the sea is. It's steely. It's kind of warship plate and rivets and.
And the semaphore and just the just all the choices of nautical themes in this guy's moment of terror as he walks along and I just see the film every time.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, really enjoying it on the new box set of Big Express.
Oh, good man. Because that album pissed off so many people when we did that record. You know, half the people said, you know, that they're using drum machines now. I don't like them. They're using machines. No, we only use machines on a few tracks on there. A lot of the sound you're hearing is drummer Pete Phipps, and
It fits.
we've processed his kit to sound like mechanical sounds or industrial sounds or sounds that don't sound like a drum kit. I didn't want it to sound like a drum kit. And they say, "Oh yeah, you can really hear that track. It sounds so mechanical." You know, these assholes on YouTube comments or whatever. And no, it's not. It's Pete sat there at his kit in the foyer of the which is up for sale. Crescent Studios is up for sale. You can go and find it on wherever you look. You know,
Yeah.
Dave Gregory sent me, "Have you seen this? What's for sale?" And yeah, so you can buy Crescent Studios if you want to own it.
Wow.
He'd be sat there in the reception area or up in the big studio upstairs with his kit, and then we'd run his kit through, you know, samples of somebody squashing something or somebody grating something or you know, adding stuff so it didn't sound like a drum kit. I wanted people to have thoughts about, you know, the Great Western Factory and building things, building trains, building carriages, this kind of life of industrial slavery that the people of the town had to do because it was literally the only job in town. So it's not all mechanical. There's only Lindrum on a few tracks. It's a lot of it is Pete Phipps heavily processed.
And you answered at least three of my questions with that because, you know, I had Dave on to talk about the reissue. And one of the things we really didn't get to was what you're mentioning, that if anything, it's a hybrid. I mean, I'm sure there are some electronic drums on there, but
Well, there's
Lindrum,
yeah, there's Lindrum on This World Over, um, because I programmed that to make a demo of it, and I was so happy with how the programming turned out. I thought, shit, why don't we just do it with this? We've already got the kind of feel I want. So we did it with the Lindrum program, and then some things some tracks are part Lindrum because of its mechanical sounds and his mechanical rhythms, like Train Running Low on Soul Coal.
Train Running Low, incredible opening.
The A parts of that are all Lindrum. You know, the snare is wound down until it's just white noise steam. You know, that sort of stuff. And then when it cuts to the B sections, you're into a real kit. You know, it's real kit in all those sections. So to me, it's like, why can't you have the best of both worlds? Why can't you have industrial and mechanical? And then when the scene cuts, we go to a different feel. You know, why has it got to be one or the other? I don't I don't understand the purity police on this. If it's right for the film, it's got to be right.
And it is a film, Andy, isn't it? I mean, isn't it about Swindon and it's people, it's air, it's sky, it's ground,
Yeah.
and
I
those
mean,
buildings.
things like Wash Away or Colin thinking about, excuse me, Colin thinking about his life with his mum and dad and his brother on this council estate, and the idea of sneaking out of school in the afternoon and being kind of alone on the estate, and it's kind of the bombs dropped, no one's around, you know, because everyone's in work or at school. And then he's listing things like the smell of cabbage from his mother's cooking. And so he's noting down his childhood life. I'm noting down my childhood life with things like Everyday Story of Small Town. I knew those women with the brand new catalog nylon nighties, you know,
Yeah.
that were getting the postman or the milkman in, you know. There's a woman that used to live at the back of us. She had a detergent box, an Omo. I don't know if you have that in the States. Omo detergent, and she used to put that on her windowsill as a signal to the milkman to come in. Because it stood for, apparently the code was Omo, between the pair of them, stood for old man out. So, you know, so stuff like that. So,
Yeah. I mean,
it's
obviously,
tiny life, but it's tiny life, but it's massive when you add it all the bits up, you know.
well, and that thing of yours of being able to go micro macro, you seem to have always been able to do that. Go to these details that add up to this much bigger picture, and it's like you're all of the scenes add up to this film. You know, this was the first time I'll admit, this is the first time I really got what I thought should be Big Express sonically. Wasn't really knocked out by the sound. Well, and just maybe compared to the other beautiful XTC recordings. I just thought this is a different thing and it wasn't somehow working. Can you just tell me a little bit about what you wanted to get right this time sonically that you were able to, given this time with Steven Wilson?
Well, Stephen gets a free hand. I'll talk to him about what I liked about the original mix of anything and what may have worried me about the original mix of any given album. And it'll be things like, I mean, with Big Express, because David Lord, producer David Lord, was an orchestral arranger. He was originally asked by the Beatles to arrange She's Leaving Home. McCartney invited him around to dinner, and said he'd like David Lord to arrange this Beatles song, and totally put George Martin out, because, you know, George Martin would have done a great job. But he wanted somebody different, so he asked David Lord, and David Lord thought, pop groups, flash in the pan, you know. And he didn't go along to the dinner, and he didn't get to arrange the track because it was beneath him in some way, you know. He was organist at Canterbury Cathedral, you know. He didn't want to dick around with a pop group.
Why was he dicking around with you guys?
Because he'd written a piece of music for, I don't know whether it was BBC or the Independent channel in Britain. He'd written a piece of music that they would play before a program came on, and it showed a clock, the sort of seconds of a clock being wiped out as the hand went round. He wrote the piece of music that they played with that. And those were the days where every time it got played, it earned him a royalty. It earned him so much. He became like rich almost overnight, you know. And so he thought, I'd like a recording studio. So he set up Crescent in Bath. And but anyway, so David Lord was always hearing smaller and smaller details in the recording of something. And I would generally get everything that I heard in my head mapped out with David Lord and the rest of the band through rehearsals and the recording process. And then David Lord would say, you know what, I really hear maybe a bassoon doubling this, or I maybe hear a glockenspiel right as a little tiny cherry on top of this, or And I think this drove Dave Gregory and Colin crazy, because they, as far as they were concerned, it was recorded. We finished it. But David Lord would hear smaller and smaller details, and let's get Annie Hutchrack doing these whispers. Annie, just try this note out. And oh, David, get her to sing this note as well and make it a bit of more rub as it goes up there. And so, the poor Colin and Dave Gregory sat at the back of the room. Oh, Jesus, are they going to dick around with this forever? It took a long time. David Lord was very slow and methodical and exacting, and I guess I am to a certain extent.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, is like he must have been your champion or sort of your engine in there.
Yeah, I think so. But I said to Stephen Wilson for the remix, it was emphasize a little more of this bit here. Can you just warm that up a little there? Those sounds, da 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 da. And then what would happen is he'd get through a run through where he'd be happy with it, and he'd send it to me, and I'd go through usually a bar or two at a time. I know that sounds pretty anal, but I'd go through with headphones a bar or two at a time, saying, can we take that tambourine a little farther out to the left? That comes in the bridge sections, or can you make the bass a little bit higher so it just sits above? I really like where you've got the bass drum there. Can we move the bass up the chart a little so it's so, and then we do that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times or more until I was happy with it. Stephen's happy with it, but Stephen's fantastic mixer because he doesn't have an ego. He doesn't, oh, you really must do this, Andy, or else it's going to be ruined. He'll just say, okay, I'll try it. And and if he likes it, this is great. You should keep this, Andy. I'm really happy with that. So it's not I'm not being der Führer and demanding that he do it in a set way.
But may I tell you my my sense of what I'm hearing was any track lowered, muted, was any kind of thinning out to make it more clear? Was that going on at all?
I think there was like generally a warming up process, because a lot of sounds, and then the mastering doesn't help. A lot of the sounds of the original mix and our state of mind at the time and musical tastes at the time. CDs were brighter, more brittle, sharper, nastier. What did I hear recently? What do you prefer? Vinyl or CD? So
yeah,
at that point in history, it was louder, sharper, more compressed, more tops on top of tops. It was quite ouch. And we were all guilty of going there at that time.
But there's buttes on there like Red Brick Dream, and that's all you, right?
That's all me. I was very upset. Actually, it's all me, and I think a friend of ours, Mitch Friedman, came along to the studio and is humming on it. I said, Mitch, just go and hum this note. The you hear it exposed at the end. I just wanted a drone thread, that went through the whole thing. But that I was kind of hurt that nobody said, that's great, that's got to go on the album, because in my head, the lyrics to that was the kind of byline that would go on the film poster if the Big Express was a film. The byline would be the lyrics about Swindon dreaming of its Victorian past, its Victorian greatness,
Couple of questions for you about Big Express before we move on. What were you most happy with in transformation of then to now and what it would sound like for people?
I think just Stephen's placement of all the details. As far as I know, there were no details left out, but it was where they got placed. I don't have a 5.1 or an Atmos setup myself, but I've heard them in a 5.1 slash an Atmos at Stephen's place. I mean, honestly, train running low in Atmos, Jesus, the kind of climax is in that part of the song. It was like I was standing up and I was really riding that thing like Universal should have some sort of Space Mountain or something.
I have it in 5, and in 5 it is very powerful.
Yeah, but it's just his placement. All the details aren't fighting. The frequencies are like strata of some rock formation, some prehistoric rock formation. Oh, in this layer we've got all the big thigh bones. This layer we've got shells. This layer we've just got all those weird sea creatures that look like pins. It's all different. He's got the right sounds in the right strata, whereas I don't know whether that got that level of attention in the original mix. And because the original mix was mixed for vinyl, it was like, okay, well, we got to squash this. We got to kill some of the dynamics of this to get it on record, which is a shame because you're spoiling some of the explosion or some of the not explosion, what's the word I want, you're spoiling some of the size of some of the sounds.
The sizing of this sonically is very important. The factory element of this is very important. If you're paying attention, I mean, you see that you're trying to make it all of a whole, and that it's about the man and the machine. And it's about that town and the vibe. And I've really come to love it in a way that I never had before. So congratulations. It's fantastic.
Well, like I said, there's also big dollops of my childhood and Colin's childhood in there.
Yeah. You're the people there. Yeah.
Yeah. We're the people there. And where I all you pretty girls, I thought when I grew up I was going to be in the Navy like my dad. So I was having these nautical fantasies of what it would be like. And funnily enough, that song came from two kind of disconnected musical events. I was just playing around one night, just messing around playing these sort of quasi Hendrix 2-note riffs, kind of da 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 da, da, sort of bluesy sounding. And I thought, oh, that's pretty good. And I had the Lindrum at that point, and I had this rhythm, this doom 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 doom, like tom toms. And I thought, what does it sound like if I just turn the tuning up so you can't get them any higher? And so I tuned the tuning of the tom toms up, and they became a musical. Not quite like bells, but almost like somebody's hitting like pans, or you had this diddle-a-dink-a-dink-a-dink-a-dink-a-dink-a-dink, and this it made me think of, is this kind of, you see these old photographs of sailors on dreadnoughts kind of hitting saucepans and things because they're having a little party for crossing the equator. And this diddle-a-dink-a-dink-a-dink, and I put the Hendrix da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da with that, and it was like, yes, this is my fantasy about when I was a kid. I was going to be in the Navy, and that's what it was going to sound like, Just,
and the opening scene sonically, the way it's painted, and it puts you there in this military scene. With, with chugga chugga chun chun, just that, the timing of that, you don't know. And then you're disoriented when it goes into the song proper, but it's
you're being marched on board with that. Bam, bam, bam. It's
It's
get up that gangway.
yeah, it's so 3D, man. It's so great.
Yeah,
Um,
the actual the you know what the choir sound is a screwed up mellotron
I do, but I
through
think that's great.
a little tiny Archer amplifier and speaker. They used to sell them at Radio Shack.
Like a pig nose, they call it.
Yeah, but it's about the size of a box of matches.
Uh-huh.
And I think Radio Shack Tandy used to do them, and we put it through one of these. It was a mellotron. It may have been one of those things I can't quite remember, where if you mess with the wheel, you don't have to have just one sound. You can move the wheel just enough so that it puts the playback head out of line with the tape, and you get a bit of the next sound on the tape. So it's probably something like orchestral mixed with choir.
Right,
You Nowadays it's just do it with MIDI, but then it was kind of, you've got to get the wheel just right.
right.
So we sent that through one of these matchbox size amp and speakers, and we put it at the bottom of a waste paper bin, a metal waste paper bin, so it had a metallic ring to it. And then I said it's not narrow enough, and we screwed up on the desk. We screwed up the EQ, and we tried not toilet roll holders, but I think the longest thing we could find, a tube, was probably kitchen roll tube, a card tube. So we sellotaped that over the microphone, so it's mellotron split in two sounds coming out through an Archer amplifier in a waste paper bin, recorded down a cardboard tube to get that, But it worked. It was like, that's the sound.
It's so interesting given what digital technology people have to actually create with now
Oh
that,
yeah, you can just, oh yeah, dial that up.
that you, like Revolver, are trying to find the sounds
Yeah, but
for that.
you got to do it in the real
And
world.
you
You got
had
to
to
find
do it in,
Yeah, you got to find a long card tube. You got to find a metal waste bin. You got to find a tiny amplifier.
but you also have
You
to conceive of the sound. I mean, this is the thing that I think is so important is production is trying to make in the outside world what you're hearing in the inside world.
Sure,
That's the job.
sure.
It's the hardest thing. If you could have, but how do you do it? Now
Yeah,
you
how
have
do
to
you
figure it
shove
out.
a mic into your head and say, "What's he hearing?"
Yeah. So this is super important because again, the organic or the mechanical quality is you guys having to be a bit of a sonic mechanic to get all these things to work to represent this picture. Um, I mean, I think you've probably been on record saying it's a concept record, but I think
It's the nearest we've ever made to a concept album. I mean, some songs don't quite fall within the concept. Things like, I mean, "Shake You Donkey Up" was just me and Dave kind of messing around. I took this idea down to his house one day and said, "Hey, Greggsy, try this," and we just kind of kicked that around until it. But nobody in Swindon rode donkeys, as far as I can remember. I think there may have been an old fella that collected rag and bone, going around the streets with a donkey at one time, but no, there was no specific link with the donkey thing to Swindon. But a lot of the tracks are our lives and our relatives' lives in Swindon.
well, you mentioned Donkey and it's just such a rollicking guitar fest. And I think that there's not a lack of guitar. When I listened, my memory of listening to it years ago was that that's not really a guitar, that's their keyboard record. And then I listen to it and I find that the guitar is great throughout. I mean, think about the opening of Wake Up. I mean, it's a fantastic guitar
Oh,
album.
that's a bit of Colin genius, getting those two argumentative chords in cross rhythms. That's as soon as I heard that, I thought, yep, that's on the album already.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I haven't even got past the intro, and that's going on the album. That's
I have to say, you mentioned intro. I'm going to say something I told Dave about the outro. The outro is like a third of the content of that song.
yeah.
It's such an incredible, methodical, taking you just, and you keep going. And I love that you guys, I've said this to you a million times, but I love that you guys relished the plateau ride out.
I thought it sounded great. I was like, can we make this go on any longer? You know, but to me, it sounds like I don't know what Colin intended. Hopefully, that's what he intended. But to me, it sounds like that state when you're half awake, you're
Hmm.
lucid dreaming. You know, you're awake, but you're not awake, and you're floating on this plateau, and everything's kind of flying in and dissolving. And to me, that section of wake up is somebody suggesting you wake up and get real, but you can't. You know, you're in this lucid dream state.
One last thing about Big Express, because I know we have a lot to talk about with the book. Um, was there not a video for Pretty Girls and
It
others?
was, and it was possibly. Oh, don't touch on videos. I detest them. Um, Possibly one of the most expensive videos, and I say expensive as in at the time I was stupid enough, we all were stupid enough to believe that Virgin Records paid for these videos to be recorded, videos that we didn't get a say in how they would look. And of course, Virgin were not paying, they were merely fronting the money, and we had to pay for all these videos, which we weren't given a say in. And we didn't own. You know, you got to pay for a video which you can't control. Um, you know, it's not going to be your vision, and the record company is going to own it for perpetuity. Oh yeah, great. You know, sign here. So I really don't like our videos.
So this
It's
was
a
a choice where you had included them on other boxes, but you just don't want them on this one.
I'm not sure of the situation. It may be that we ran out of space, physical space with the Atmos or something. I know there was a very practical reason for not including it.
Am I crazy, or was there a video made for This World Over?
No, there was a TV mime, as in 99% of TV appearances were
Right,
mimes.
right, sure.
You know, people say, why did you mime on that show? Well, that's the rule of going on that show. They don't want to dick around getting
No,
your sounds
no.
and then ruining it, you know. So you have to agree to mime to go on these
And
shows.
who I remember seeing it with candles and such. Who came up with that scenario?
That was God, I can't even remember what show it was. It was probably one of the Saturday morning kids TV shows, and that was our single at the time. So it would have been go to this studio for 10 o'clock in the morning, da da da. You know,
And they
stand
had the
there.
set.
Yeah, that was there was zero input. You know,
Yeah.
all I can remember about that, it was a bit chilly in the studio, so I kept my coat on
Yes.
and I was trying to grow a Dave Davis chin strap beard, and it wasn't working, and one side was a bit thicker than the other. So the makeup lady said, oh, I'll just dust you off lightly, love. And I said, can you do something to darken up this side of my beard? And so she sort of brushed a bit of something brown in it, you know. So
Neat.
if you see it, you know, on on YouTube or wherever you blunder into it, one side of my beard is real and the other side is about 50% makeup. That's all I can remember about that performance.
Wow. Well, let's talk about this special occasion of the
Sorry,
book.
the minutia gets overwhelming.
It's enjoyable. The book is out. I have copy 1024 of 2000. It's signed by Mr.
Oh yeah,
P.
they're numbered.
And
That's right.
it's a numbered edition of hardcover. And enjoying it very much, Andy. Um, I wanted to talk to you about a few of the songs
Sure.
and really choices that you made, because I find it interesting that um, they're kind of stylistically diverse, and that
Yes.
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I don't want to eat. I don't want to eat coffee, cake, or every meal for the rest of my life. So
Yeah.
I don't want to see the same thing. And each song demands a different picture, a different scene, a different film, a different life. It's
But can I tell you, don't you think the 60s and 70s were the variety era, picking up after the 50s, where it's just you have
yeah.
to have a big variety of things
Yeah,
to
the
entertain?
50s was, 50s was TV dinners and everything is short back and sides and buttoned up and behave, don't question anything. Da, da, da. It was like the automaton era or something. And when the 60s came along and the pill, and it meant that people could fuck around without, being tied to the old idea of the family, which at that time, wait, I don't have to get married to have sex. It was everything just opened up. And I think it was marvelous for the arts and probably disastrous for family life.
Mm. But
So it's swings and roundabouts.
there's a youth culture of questioning there. There's a progressivism there, trying to get things get better, try to
Yeah.
improve things, try to have less bad things happen.
Exactly. Oh, let's go to war. Let's go to Vietnam. Wait, 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 wait. Why? Why would we want to be in Vietnam? Ah, because you're our allies. No, we don't want to go to Vietnam. Best thing that that Prime Minister did, Harold Wilson. He's the fellow with the chocolate brown teeth who's presenting the Beatles with the awards at some luncheon. But he said we're not going to go into Vietnam, which I do wish we weren't going anywhere in the Middle East or any of that Ukraine nonsense and all that.
100%.
Yeah, it's not our. We've made it our war, and that is the problem. It's stop making wars. Just stop slaughtering people.
You
Oh
know,
man. Anyway,
I'm,
I'll get off that because it's a big, deep, horrible
no,
rabbit.
no, I'm Armenian. That's all I need to say if anybody knows their history. So yes, I'm a little concerned.
Hmm.
Um,
So yeah, so where
yes.
were we?
So I wanted to talk to you about specific visuals, and we'll pop them up on the
Okay,
screen as we talk about them. But
okay.
um, before, just as a little preface, before we go any into the songs, the concept of pop art, and you know your comic books, and you know that there's a period where Marvel embraces the term pop art, and you know
Well,
that
they let
there's
Steranko go loose.
things like that, right? Op art,
Yeah,
or
yeah, that was yeah. It was like he took Bridget Riley into the comic world.
or even
So
or shots from Vertigo, or shots from Psycho, or just
yeah.
definitely the filmic,
Well, I think Kirby got that because when Roy Lichtenstein, started lifting comic panels, I sensed that Kirby thought, "Oh, you want to go big, do you?" It was like suddenly we're seeing full page or double page
double page
Kirby.
spread. Yeah.
And before it was all regular panels, regular, it's got to
Mhm.
fit into that world. And so it was great to see all that busting open.
The
And
best.
because as a kid, as a teen, I used to copy. I loved the idea that Liechtenstein did of lifting particular panels that he liked the look of and painting them big. And I remember, I remember painting. There was a thing of Bruce Banner laid on a bed, some sort of experimental type laboratory bed with a ray hitting him, and he's turning into the Hulk. I think it was a Kirby drawing.
It first Hulk is Kirby.
Yeah. Anyway, I had to paint this. I didn't measure it up or anything. I just painted it freehand, but about 3 foot by 2.5 foot or something, and stuck it on my door of my bedroom as a kid. Yeah. So I was fascinated by that kind of the sort of mirror reflection. The pop art world was looking at comics, and comics were looking at the pop art world, and I was fascinated that Roy Lichtenstein in the States was taking panels and blowing them up, giant size, and everyone was going, wow, that's amazing. Well, look at the source material. The source material is pretty fantastic, but it's little, you know. And I liked the idea of large comic panels, so I took a frame from a Hulk where he's on some sort of laboratory bench. Bruce Banner, too many B's in one sentence. Bruce Banner is getting zapped, and he's turning into Hulk or turning back into Bruce Banner or something. And I loved that, so I thought I'm doing a large version of that. So I did like a 3 foot by 2'6" painted version of it and put it on my door of my teen bedroom. And so that was my homage to Roy Lichtenstein, who was a homage to Kirby in that case. And before this gets too confusing, it's oddly completed the circle because I married Roy Lichtenstein's muse, Erica Wexler, and so there you go, Roy. I got her in the end. Ha ha.
That is really fascinating. Circuitous
It's a
line.
circuitous route, but
Yeah.
we ended up fine with it.
So, do you have favorites in the book before I tell you any of mine?
I do have some that I think worked out better because originally this was never meant to be published as a book. A little bit of the backstory for people not in the know. A few years ago, a book of interviews came out called Complicated Game, where I'm speaking to Todd Bernhardt, another drummer and American writer and so on. And he said we should publish the best of these interviews in a book, and which happened, and it was a paperback book called Complicated Game. And they said, oh, they want to do a limited edition hardback versions. And I thought, oh, how can I make these special for people? Because they'd set out a price point, and I thought, oh, that's quite high price point. I should give people something special, an individual for each person that buys a hardback copy. So like an idiot, I thought I'm going to paint an individual cover based around an individual song title. They will all be different for, I think it was something like 56 books, something like that. I'm going to do all those paintings as wraparound covers, individual one-off wraparound covers. I thought, yeah, I can knock each one of those up in an hour. Oh, what a fool. I spent 3 days or more on each one. Took me forever, best part of a year to paint these. And I just did them all on the kitchen table and cut up the paper. And I thought, how am I going to measure so that all these paintings are the same size? So I took a standard kind of postcard, and I just laid it, made a template, pushed the piece of paper in the template, laid the postcard down what would be the front of the dust jacket, drew around that in pencil, and so they're all the size of a postcard. And actually, when they got reproduced in the book, they're twice the size, which is very unusual, because usually you do artwork which is then reduced and tightened up. They call it tightening up by basically shrinking it, so all the lines are finer, all the mistakes are less obvious and all that kind of thing. But so I did all these covers, and off they went, and people seemed happy with them. Why, some were even for sale on eBay within record time. Grr. So that was a good thing. And then the artist I tend to work with all the time, Andrew Swainson, he made this for me one Christmas. He said, I've taken all of your paintings and I've made a book, like a sort of a 70s pop annual type thing. But what I've done is I've just filled it with all of your paintings. And he said, there are 10 copies of this. Here, have one. Happy Christmas. And I thought, you know what? That looks really nice. Might be nice if something like this existed. And so him making it as a one-off / 10-off gift for people made me think, you know what, we should do this as a real book. So we tweaked it a little. Like, for example, he put all the paintings on the left side. And I thought, no, wouldn't it be nice to open the pages and you see the picture first, then the explanation is on the right. So we flipped it all over, made it a more somber cover so that when you opened up, it was more explosive on the eyeballs, you know. And so that's how we went along, and there you go. And so Pop Artery became a thing for sale out of Andrew Swainson mischievously putting all these paintings together, scans of these paintings together, and to make a present, you know.
And I love the inferences from the title.
Well, it was because of that. He chose that one to go on the cover. And to me, here's a paperback version, which there's only a few of these in the world because they're for making corrections, and you know, looks like a bit of a buckskin jacket. I could join Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young wearing this, you know.
I hope.
But yeah, this was just for making any spelling corrections or any visual corrections or whatever. There's a couple of these in the world. But so what was I talking about? Crosby, Stills and Nash. Damn, you got me off of
no, bringing the book into the world.
Yeah, just bringing the book into the world and getting people to see these pictures. But the tricky thing was deciding on an image for each song, because each song has got 100, 1,000 images from me, and it's like saying, well, which bit of the film, which frame of the film would you like to clip out, and that's got to represent the whole film. That's kind of impossible, you know. It's a bit like we call them foyer cards. When you used to go to a film, you'd have, say, 3 photographs from the film, and they'd all look very different. And you think, wow, what's this film going to be like? You know, because here's pretty ladies in pastel colored dresses, here's a submarine upended in the sea, and here's a plate of dinner. And you think, what's this film going to be like, you know? And like I say, it's with each of these songs, with anybody's songs, how do you clip out one frame from the song and say, this is the foyer card of what you're going to get?
But isn't there a collage aspect to some of these?
There's a collage aspect to some extent, but I
Like
tried
25
to,
o'clock?
yeah, with some of them I had to cheat a little. It's like with film posters again, they cut around people's heads and try
Mhm.
and put them all in the same scene, and you know full well that those actors never appear in the same scenes together. So there was a certain amount of kind of mental collaging going on, but the hard work was reducing it down, reducing each song down to one image. And on some of those, I think I succeeded, and on some, I don't think I did succeed. I was trying to grab something which was escaping my grasp. Yeah. So I do have favorites, and I have ones that I'm not so sure whether they succeeded or not. And other people have told me, "Oh, that's my favorite one." I'm thinking, "Oh, perhaps I should shut up."
Well, but for everyone has favorite songs for different reasons, they
Sure.
strike you. Of course, one of my favorites is Across This Ant Heap.
All right, hang on a second. I'm going to find the visual. Might be easier to find it in the this version.
Because when we last spoke on the show, we spoke about the influence and where your fascination with the ant came from.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's probably supposed to be a how shall I say, a pantomime version of myself in bed doing the silent scream
Mm,
while the paranoia of all the ants as stars in the sky, um, because insects would fascinate and frighten the shit out of me, but so did stars. uh, I had astrophobia, and when I went to Cub Scouts, English winter, autumn and winter nights, by the time you came back from Cub Scouts, it would be dark and all those stars would be up there. And I developed a phobia where I could not look at the stars. And I would run home as fast as I can, staring at the ground. And then only when I got in the house and looked through the clouded, dimpled glass of the coal shed where you had to come in to get to the house, it's a long story, I could look at these kind of distorted insect looking like stars through the this distorted glass, and
right.
then I'm safe, they haven't got me.
Mm.
And so this astrophobia lasted a few years. I just could not look at stars. I had to avert my gaze instantly.
I find that fascinating.
But I kind of associated them with the multiplicity, the crowds of ants or bees or
Hmm.
anything else Jack Kirby would end up reducing a human and putting them in the hive for, you know. So I my astrophobia was a lot to do with the whole thing. So a fascination with ants, humans as ants, ants as stars. It's a big psychiatric mess.
Ants as uh, conformed and uniform. To
Yeah,
be,
but it's the life that the mass makes, this alien life that the mass of insects makes. And maybe I felt guilty about popping them with a magnifying glass on hot days. As a kid, I don't know any kid that didn't do that, which is terrible, really. Can you imagine going about your business in the streets and suddenly you feel a hot ray on the back of your neck, and then within a few seconds you explode? Oh, so I'm going to hell for that.
we all are. I wondered about Strange Tales, Strange Tales. Another
You're picking
favorite.
all the comic related ones. Hang on, let's
We'll
find that.
we'll we'll move away from that, but that is something that
Okay, let's
I
see.
thought was lots of fun.
Okay, S, because Andrew said we should have them in alphabetical.
I've
And I
got
thought,
it
what?
here, Andy.
There's no other. Oh, there you go. He's got it. Yeah. You see, to me, when I painted that, to me, that it makes me think of Peter Blegvad, who the poor soul is very ill at the moment.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Peter Blegvad as Elvis. Um, this was a one that was difficult for me to pull into one image. So this strange alien rock and roll creature who is singing into one of his limbs while another of his limbs makes a paintbrush, and he's kind of howling at the moon there, and strangely to my eyes looking like an eyeless Peter Blegvad.
Wow.
It's a bit of a mess, that one, but I guess the images in my head were were arguing, but I think I've just about wrung the essence of the song out for that one.
And it's so much fun. I don't know if the listeners are doing this that have the book, but it's so much fun to listen to the song while you're looking at the
All
book.
right. Yeah. You see,
Yeah.
that whole song was just, I don't think it's one of the better songs. It's just impressionistic, almost like an impressionistic argument about comic imagery and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of songs with comic book
Okay,
imagery.
I'm gonna pick a favorite.
Go, please.
Here we go. I've really, this one really clicked for me, and I also felt a sense of pride. Shit, I've just forgotten. Oh yeah, I got it. Here we go. Tin Toy Clockwork Train. So I was so pleased that I got the little tin toy porter or driver or whatever he is to look like tin. I was really chuffed at that. I thought to myself, damn, that should be a large size painting. And you know, because it works, it really works.
Tell everyone how big the canvases were that you worked on.
Oh, they were tiny. Well, if that's the size they printed in the book, if you take half of that size, which is a postcard,
Okay,
that's what
that's
size
all.
that's all they were painted was postcard, which
Okay,
is
I
half,
misunderstood. Yeah.
half
Wow.
this size. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But that song was written for a French fan who worked in an ad agency who said, we're doing this big campaign for Eurostar trains that we're doing in the French station and in the London station where they come in. And we're giving away CDs to promote Eurostar. And do you have a Jukes song? Because I really like the Jukes and I'd love it to sound like a Jukes song. And I'm not so sure we had anything. So I thought, I'm going to knock something up that he may like. And he didn't like the first thing my nose was at a joint. He didn't like the first. He said, do you have something with more of a railway theme? And I had a bubblegum / Duke song that never got finished called My Pink Aeroplane. And I just flipped the lyrics around to a Tin Toy Clockwork Train, which scanned the same. And it was all about trains. And then I thought, no, we got to do it like a real stomping 60s kind of thing. He loved it. So they pressed up these CDs and gave them away in the stations, gave them away in Paris. I think they gave them away in London as well. So lots of people could frisbee them onto the tracks, you know. Dukes of Stratosphere, never heard of them, fling, you know.
But that's interesting when such an effort was made back in the day to involve people, and they would become collectibles, really.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
guys have so much
They
stuff
didn't
like
make
that.
that many of them, and I'm sure a lot of people flung them, not knowing who it was, you know.
Yeah. Well, here's from a design point of view, something that I think is quite, quite spiffy. And if you even go in close enough, I think, Andy, if I might ask you, do you not have XTC written on those shields?
Um, I may be being a bit naughty. Hang on, let's have a look. Uh,
They're
I
spread
think
out.
I was going to with the first one was going to be the X. You could see I didn't get my rubber out and get rid of the pencil line. The first one was going to be an X, and I thought, no, that's just too crass. I won't do it.
You
But
did.
I'd already plotted out the T and the C, so I didn't. I didn't finish up with making the first one an X, like the shield on the Mummer photograph, which is a red X.
Right. But the idea of when you see X, this one red line through something throughout Europe and the world, it means no, this
Yeah,
it's
forbidden.
X,
Verboten.
X,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly.
Off limits. But yeah, and that Harryhausen. I haven't seen Jason and the Argonauts in a while,
I
but
watched it in the bath recently.
ah,
I do what myself and a friend of mine call soap sud cinema. So what you do, you get your laptop, you put it on the toilet seat near the bath or at an angle so you can see it. You pick a film, you're scrubbing away, and it's something you haven't seen for a long time or something you've never seen, and just really enjoyable sensation, all that hot water and suds, and you're like 8 years old again and you're watching Jason and the Argonauts or whatever, or what age you are, and totally enjoyable. So soap sud cinema is recommended to everyone.
it's so interesting how with everything that we've been dealing with emotionally throughout the last few years, I find horror films and films of my youth to be a huge source of comfort.
Yeah, it's like a balm.
It really is.
Hmm.
My son and I watched Day the Earth Stood Still recently.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
watched a thing about Gort. Where is Gort? Yeah, there's a little thing on YouTube called Where is Gort, which was fascinating.
Gort
I
Barenga.
didn't know there was a little sort of 4-inch Gort as well, made out of rubber. He's pretty much all perished, but he's still just about hanging intact there. The helmet was, there were several suits made, one that did up at the back and one that did up at the front for shots from the reverse. And the fella couldn't stay in those suits for very long, he couldn't breathe in there.
Yeah. But it's a good looking film for
It's a
what it
great
is,
film, yeah.
for what they could do with getting that thing to fly through the sky and look like something, for I think it's a 54 movie.
Yeah,
So
I think it's that early, yeah.
yeah. And
You know what? Wasn't that around the same time that there was that very large fleet of saucers flew over the White House? It was filmed. You can find the film or photographs on the net, and there's nothing they could do about it.
yeah.
It's you see like a dozen saucers going over the White House. It's like we're powerless.
Well, yeah, that became a trope actually in Independence Day and Mars Attacks. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
Oh man, I loved Mars Attacks. That what's his name? Norman Saunders artwork. Oh,
Mhm.
divine stuff. Anyway, sorry,
Right.
getting off the Beatle track here.
But we're on the visual track, Andy Partridge, and that's a good place to be with you.